Hello, Dawn of Faith viewers. Welcome to today's episode. Today's episode is entitled A Call to Worship. And before that, let's believe and pray. Our dear Jesus, may we tabernacle with you. Help us, O Lord. Be with us now and forevermore. Just name I do pray and believe. Amen. Now, our today's episode is just a summary of the book of Hosea. And the context of Hosea was written in a time when Israel was very corrupt. And during that time, the kings and the priests were in alliance, and the kings and the priests had become so corrupt to such a level that there was increased disparities between the rich and the poor. And so during that time, they had created a very unequal distribution of resources to an extent that there was a non-existent middle class. And now, having that in mind, then God came to Hosea. He gave his message to Hosea. And now there's something very peculiar about the type of worship that lived during the time of Hosea. So during that time, the time of Hosea, there was increased sexual worship. So people used to do sexual worships to other gods and all that. And so God came at a time when these guys had been perverted. You see, the perversion in worship had led to perversion in morals to the extent that the rich had no regard for the poor. They were mistreating them, and the high priests and the priests were so corrupt to the level that the church and the kings at that time, they had gone in bed. So the kings and the priests, the kings used to corrupt the priests to get favorable terms and all those things. And now, so God comes to Hosea with a very real examples. And I've told you they were involved in sexual worship. And so God uses an example that they are very familiar with. You know, previously he had tried to reach them with different prophets. There was Elijah, there was so many other prophets that God had reached to them. But they seemed to misunderstand his message. And so in Hosea, he actually addressed them in the language that they understood. Since they were practicing sexual worship, God chose to use a sexual example to be able to amplify his message. And so he told Hosea to go and take a prostitute, and throughout that prostitute, he demonstrated and called Israel to true worship. He had really shown them his love for them. But now, having that background in mind, today what I wanted us to learn is, as we live in these days, we live in societies where the rich keeps getting richer and the poor keeps on getting poor. We live in a society where the church is becoming corrupt, and so there is no voice for the poor. And so this leaves a vacuum for people calling to social justice and all that, just because the church, leaders, we failed to protect the poor. Ever since Adam and Eve rebelled in the Garden of Eden, we've been under a despotic rulership. And if you want to see how despotic the new ruler is, look at the story of Job. This enemy, the devil, Christ clearly tells us that he's the prince of this world. And so this despotic ruler, if you look at the very acts that he did to Job, he murdered the sons and daughters of Job. He destroyed Job completely. So that is the kind of ruler that we are dealing with. He destroys everything and then he blames it to God. And so today, God is trying to tell us that look beyond these issues. Our problem lies in the very first instance of sin. Our problem lies with the despotic ruler that we've always had for the last 6,000 years. And so he's calling us today, just like the way he called Israel in Hosea's time, that let us come to him and let us revive the true worship. If the church, if the citizenry, if the kings of this world decide to seek true godliness, indeed, Christ tells us that he will renew our mind. And so we will tend to the poor, we will tend to our friends, and we will do all these things. And so today, friends, I'm just giving you glimpses of the book of Hosea, and I want you to, in your spare time, go and read it and look at the context, look at the society that was living, and it will give you glimpses of the current society that we are living with. And so may God bless you, and may God keep you. See you again in our next episode.